I am Michael Hunt. I'm the Director of Title IX Services in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Texas Lutheran University. I use he, him pronouns.
I'm Hannah Klug. I'm with the Guadalupe Valley Family Violence Shelter. I am our community engagement specialist and sexual assault advocate. So I'm kind of a little bit direct client services, and I work with survivors in the shelter or remotely outside of the shelter. And then I also handle outreach and collaborate with Michael pretty frequently at TLU.
Yes, you do. And tonight, both of our organizations, TLU's Title IX Services and the Guadalupe Valley Family Violence Shelter, would like to welcome you to a community program entitled Sexual Violence Response, Forensics Exams, and Advocacy Services. It is part of our community's Sexual Assault Awareness Month programming. Our panelists tonight are Deb Aponte and Stephanie Johnson. Deb is the SANE coordinator at Guadalupe Regional Medical Center, and Stephanie is the Sexual Assault Program Coordinator at the Guadalupe Valley Family Violence Shelter. I do want to let everyone know that we will have discussion of sexual violence, especially sexual assault tonight. If that topic can be triggering for you, we suggest that you feel free to leave the meeting or take a break and come back if you can. We have many resources here in the community, including the Guadalupe Valley Family Violence Shelter, the TLU Counseling Center here on campus, that are local resources that are available for you. And I can put contact info for those services in the chat later. So we encourage you to reach out to those folks and to your own support network if needed. Okay. We'll follow our panel discussion tonight with a question and answer session. So at that time, if you have questions, you can submit those either through the chat or the Q&A function. And I do want to let you know that we are recording this tonight for others to be able to view later. So at this point, I will turn it over to Deb and Stephanie, and I'll let y'all introduce yourselves more fully and talk to us a little bit about our topic tonight. So thank you all.
So my name is Deb Aponte, and I'm the Sexual Assault Coordinator here at Guadalupe Regional Medical Center in Seguin. And my role as the coordinator is to oversee the sexual assault program here, which we're based out in Seguin, and also to perform sexual assault examinations. And I do perform them on the pediatric population as well as the adult population. One of my other roles as a sexual assault nurse and coordinator is to be an expert witness in the court of law when it comes to a criminal case. So I just want to welcome y'all. I've been a nurse for over 15 years and a SANE nurse for like 2 years. So I'll hand it off to Stephanie, and then we can go from there.
And I'm Stephanie Johnson. I'm the Sexual Assault Program Coordinator. I've been with the shelter for going on 12 years, have been with the SANE program for 4. And just as well as being the Sexual Assault Program Coordinator, I'm also the case manager as well. And so I provide resources to ladies in the shelter and also to the survivors when we're doing exams. Deb, if you want to go ahead and talk about the SANEs.
Okay, so a sexual assault event is a traumatic experience, regardless of if there's a presence of physical injuries. So there doesn't need to be physical injuries when it comes to a sexual assault. Some people may think that, there needs to be injuries, but there does not need to be any injuries at all. So as a sexual assault nurse, when I'm caring for my sexual assault patient, I keep in mind the three E's of trauma, which is the first one is the trauma event, the event that the patient has encountered. The second is the patient's experience during this encounter. And the last one is the long-term adverse events that has occurred. So these events might occur as soon as the assault has taken place. The patient may, experience depression, they may experience anger, sadness, or they may not. It may take them up to like 6, 7 months, maybe years for the effects of the sexual assault examination to come to light. So it is imperative that as a nurse, I use my trauma-informed care approach when dealing with the sexual assault patients. So I do this by, recognizing that my patient has experienced a trauma, of course, realizing that the trauma has occurred, as well as responding to their trauma, meaning validating their sexual assault and validating their fears. And lastly, to not re-traumatize my patient. Okay, that's not what the goal is. That's not what the goal is. The goal is to promote healing, and so to walk them through the process of this sexual event that has occurred to them. So, with saying that, I have a patient-centered approach, which, it's all about my patient. It's centered around them and it's centered around their care. So in order to do that, I first have to create a safe environment, right? I have to create this environment where they're open to talk to me and to, tell me their story, because their story is important. It has happened to them, and it should have never happened, but it did happen. So, my job is to create that environment so they will be open to talking to me, open to telling me exactly what happened. But saying that goes along with creating a trusting relationship, laying down that foundation, because without the trust of my patient, then they're not going to open up to me. So I have to, lay down that foundation. So when I lay down that foundation, I create a rapport with them, and I'm very truthful. I'm upfront with them, because this experience is a horrible experience, and I want them to be able to overcome this, and I want them to be able to seek out the resources that is available for them. So what I do is I just walk them through the process. I tell them they're right. They have a right to a sexual assault examination, regardless if they want to report it or not. So in cases where they don't want to report the sexual assault examination, I'll explain their options. I let them know that, they can decline at any point during examination. They can just tell me, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't take it right now. And to let them know that, hey, listen, I have an advocate for them. If they want an advocate, if they want someone to be by their side while I'm doing the examination, they have this right. So I will tell you, in my experience, I recently did have a young lady that was so traumatized with her assault that it took 2 days for her to complete it. And, it happened over a weekend, and, it was a Sunday night, and she was just exhausted, and the assault had happened in the wee mornings of Sunday. And so I let her go home, and I called her a couple of days later, and I asked her how she was doing, and asked her if she wanted to continue. And to my surprise, she was very open. She said, I'm in a better state of mind. I think I can do this. And she came in, and we completed the sexual assault examination and the kit. So, everyone is different. So that's why, it's really important to me as a state nurse to lay down this foundation, this caring foundation, this trusting foundation, to let them know that, I'm here with them every step of the way. So another part of my role as a sexual assault examiner, and part of my job is to incorporate the different people in my community that are key players in this sexual assault case, like the Child Advocacy Center when I'm dealing with a pediatric patient, the crisis center when I need an advocate, law enforcement when I need them to authorize a sexual assault examination, or even to schedule one for them. So this is a little bit about what I do, and I just want to show you the kit that we use. It's right here. Everything that I need to do my sexual assault examination and my documentation is in that kit. And I will pass it over to Stephanie. And at the end, you feel free to ask me questions.
Okay, so just a little bit about us at the shelter. We serve 4 counties, which is Guadalupe, Gonzales, Karnes, and Wilson. And so if we have a survivor out of any of those counties, we're going to respond. Most of our calls come from the nurses themselves asking us to come to the hospital. Sometimes it's from law enforcement, sometimes it's from the CAC. We also have a partnership with Karnes Correctional, Karnes Correctional, I'm sorry. And so we will respond if there is a prisoner who has been sexually assaulted as well. We are survivor-centered. And so that's our main focus, is the survivor. So when we get that call and we respond to the exam, our sole purpose, or I think our main purpose, is to provide that support, whether it be the survivor in the room during the exam, or we wait for her after the exam is finished. In the case of children, a lot of times we may not be in the room with the children, but we're providing that support to family members who are waiting for that child. What we really do is we come in, we talk about our services. We also offer counseling. We can talk to them about crime victims compensation, if there's any additional fees that fall out of the scope of the exam. We give them community resources. If they need clothing or housing options, we also can provide that shelter if someone needs it. We will go to law enforcement appointments with them, whether that's talking to an officer or following the whole case through the court. We do that as well. We go to the DA's office. We help with restraining orders. Anything that survivor needs, that's what we're going to do. After the exam, we ask the survivor if we can contact them within 72 hours. And we're just doing, just as Deb does, a check-in, seeing if they need anything, how they're doing. And if there's anything that we need to schedule for them. And so that's kind of what our role is during that exam. And also, sometimes we may hear things when the nurse steps out that we can also let the nurse know as well if there's a concern. So that's in a nutshell what we do during the exam. And if there's any questions for me.
Well, thank you both. And again, if anyone does have questions, you're welcome to submit them through either the chat or the Q&A function. We are relatively new to running webinars, and so I'll try to find your questions and make sure that we get them asked for you. I will start off with a question though. Deb, what should survivors or patients do or not do in terms of before coming for an exam? What should they perhaps not do before they come?
So when there has been a sexual assault that has occurred, we tell all the patients, or we tell the survivor not to wash themselves, not to brush their teeth, not to change their clothes, because there's so much evidence that could be collected from the clothes and from, the buccal swabs in their mouth that I collect, and just swabbing of the different parts of the body where they have been violated. So we would really prefer not to have our patients bathe and brush their teeth, because we have a time period of 120 hours. So within that 120 hours is the best time to collect any kind of DNA. But after that, you get washed, you brush your teeth, all that DNA is not there if that's what happens. We also ask them, if law enforcement hasn't collected their clothes, we also tell them to bag their clothes up in a paper bag. Not a plastic bag, but a paper bag. Because when you bag it up in a paper bag, it secures the DNA. There's something with the plastic that's biodegradable, and it kind of messes with the DNA. So we ask them to to bring it bagged in a paper bag. And anything, anything else that they can think of, or anything, I have some patients that come and they show me pictures, you know what I mean, to give me a visualization. Usually they're handed off to law enforcement. Law enforcement will confiscate their phone, or, will ask permission to obtain the photos off their phones.
Thank you. And if I'm not mistaken, that 120-hour period, that has increased over time in terms of, I feel like it used to be a 72-hour period, and then maybe they've lengthened it now to 120. Is there an optimal time for them to come in?
As soon as possible, as soon as, as hard as it may seem, and as hard as it is for that patient or the survivor, to come in as soon as this happens, or disclose it, to tell someone, because the longer that person waits, the harder it gets. The DNA isn't there, and then they become more depressed, or they become withdrawn. And with sexual assault, I mean, the trauma is there, and we want them to overcome that trauma. We want them to get past it, to move on, and to live a productive life, and not have to worry about this, and not have to live with this for the rest of their life, even though they will, but in a positive way.
If I could just chime in, I think that's a good point to make when it comes to, number one, the reason why we're doing this event, why we're raising awareness around what these processes look like. We want survivors to know, as an agency and as a community partnership, that survivors are not alone. I think, like you said, these things are often much bigger than we can see or feel in the moment, and we often can think that that we should be able to handle these things alone. But the thing is when it comes to trauma, it really makes all the difference to have someone there in your corner, supporting you along the way, making the calls that need to be made, connecting you with those resources that you might be in need of. Trauma affects so many different components of life, and if people aren't there to help streamline those processes for us, then survivors are not going to understand where they can go to find these things, or they're not going to know that these things are accessible to them in the first place. They're not going to know that that the resources are available to them, and so thank you very much for answering those questions and for kind of going through those processes for us, because I think the more people who understand and know how these things work, and know how we work as a community together for the benefit of the survivor, then the more people will actually seek out that support and find healing and find a way to overcome the things that they have endured.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here for. We're here for them. We're here, because we want to be here, and we want to help them through this journey to healing.
Okay, I have a question. How do you encourage survivors to get help within that time frame? And if they don't, how do you give them hope that they can still do something about it?
So just by reaching out, you know what I mean? Just having the resources on campus, or, in the community, education, lots of education, getting it out to them, to encourage them that, they're not alone, like Hannah said in this. There's always someone out there that has gone through a similar situation that can lend a hand. As far as the time frame, it's 120 hours. So over that 120 hours, since my goal is to diagnose and treat, to collect the evidence within that period of time, the DNA, I would encourage them to still open up, to seek out counseling, but also to follow up with their with their primary care doctor, to reach out to law enforcement, because even though after the 120 hours, I may not be able to do a forensic exam, they can still report it. They can still report it to law enforcement. And, you know, I mean, and that's one of the best things to do, because then, you know, you've dealt with it, and, you know, you're seeking the assistance out to get help. And this is what I need to do. So, and I'm always around. I mean, if anyone has any questions, I mean, you know, you have my contact information. Hannah has my contact information. Have them call me. My phone is always on.
And also to kind of add to that, you know, I think part of the question was, how do you give them hope that they can still do something about it? And I think that, you know, aside from the legal system, aside from pressing charges or, you know, seeking justice in that way, there's a lot that we can do for ourselves as survivors. You know, I do want to point out, it's been mentioned already, but our agency helps with counseling. You know, our agency helps with prevention education. Our agency provides legal advocacy. So accompaniment to court, accompaniment to file a law enforcement report, regardless of what the outcome is after the fact. You know, the whole way, the point of our agency and organization and the services that we provide is to show survivors that, you know, you're not going to go this alone, regardless of how the legal system plays out or how the legal process looks for you. If it's something that you choose to go with, you know, we're still here to continue providing that support, because there's much more that you can do for yourself than just that. You know, we have to, as a community, I think, work harder to bring ourselves that healing and that overcoming on a personal level, on an individual level. And so, you know, I think really understanding the full scope of resources available is integral to healing and overcoming. And so, you know, just letting someone know, hey, you know, it doesn't matter what happens legally or, you know, with the exam or with the evidence, but you know, you can still get counseling. You can still go and talk to someone. You can still call this crisis hotline and you know, speak to an advocate and see if there are services available to you. And I think that can be just as empowering as any other form of support. You know, I think it's about collaborating, like we're talking about it, you know, tonight and on Thursday. You know, just leaning on those resources that are available and working together with your community. And so, you know, if you know someone who might be in need of some of these services, let them know that, hey, you know, you're not alone, and there's support out there, and it's completely free and it's confidential, and people want to help. People want to support you.
I just would also like to add as well, sometimes that first step is having someone say, I believe you. And that usually will encourage, I can say from my experience working in the shelter, working with people, they've never had someone say, I believe you. And having someone say, I believe you can also just catapult them into taking that step to getting the help that they need.
That's the truth.
I'd also just like to throw in there for those people who are here tonight and maybe who see this later, if you're a member of the TLU community, either as a student or employee, you also have the option of filing a report with the university. You have an option to file with Seguin Police Department, University Police Department, or with the university. And we can also investigate under the school's policies. And so that's another option, and another option that I don't think any investigation is easy for anyone, but I think that our process is often quicker, a little less overwhelming, as opposed to a criminal investigation. And so I just want to make sure that folks know that that is also another option. And of course, you have the option to not pursue an investigation at all. You have an option just to get support services and resources and counseling. And you have that option at the university as well. So just wanted to put in a plug for my office as well there. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, Michael, if you don't mind, without going down the rabbit hole of investigation policy, as I know you're all too familiar with, if you could just kind of explain the process of an investigation thereafter a report, what should a student expect if they do decide to report sexual violence?
Sure. The first thing we would do is we would reach out and make sure that you have support services and that you know about the resources that are available to you. After that, we would interview both of the involved parties, or maybe more if there's more than two parties. We would also talk to witnesses. We would gather evidence, and then we would write an investigation report. And after that report would go to a hearing panel, which would review the university's policies, review the information that was gathered, and determine if there was a violation. And so penalties can range from anything from suspension, probation, expulsion, termination, depending on if we're talking students or employees, and that does happen. That does happen. We see the whole range of sanctions from that, and so it's again not as drawn out and not as, I think, overwhelming as the criminal process, but it is still a difficult process. I do recognize that being involved in any process like that is difficult, especially while you're still experiencing traumatic effects, which, as we know, can last a very long time. So I did get another question. Who is the best person to contact or to call first in these cases?
That's a good question. I think it really depends on what the survivor is needing in that moment. Yeah, what they're needing, what they're comfortable with. Now, if it's somebody who is just 100% certain that they're going to get a forensic examination, and they want to go and go schedule it, whatever, go in, meet with Deb, they can do that, and they'll automatically see an advocate. So then other services will be made available to them. Or if they're needing, immediate protection, they might want to call law enforcement, or they might want to look locally, like, for instance, if they're a TLU student, could be campus PD that they reach out to, or and they could call the crisis hotline, and we could talk to them about what their options are across the board, and they could kind of pick where they want to begin. But ultimately, all of these services are available, and so it's just a matter of kind of, what are you comfortable with, and what are you needing in that moment? I don't know. Steph, do you want to chime in at all on this one?
I think from my perspective, when an assault happens, there's chaos. And so there's a lot of confusion with the survivor as well. And so if there's injuries, I would say first and foremost, go to the hospital. Even if it's not for the SANE exam, you go to the hospital. The person can go to the hospital, go through the ER, and if it's determined, if she discloses or he discloses that there's an assault, that will generate the process where Deb will be contacted, law enforcement will be contacted, and then we will be contacted. That's where I would say, especially if there's severe injuries involved, to start there. Other instances, we've had people, show up at our gate. We've had people show up at law enforcement. Again, like you said, it's worth what they're willing to do. But I would say if there's injuries, go to the ER and start there.
Absolutely. Really great point. Thank you.
I agree with you, Stephanie, especially if there's any life-threatening injuries, because life-threatening injuries, they take precedence over a sexual assault examination. You know, somebody has been assaulted, but they're having trouble breathing and they can't breathe. You know, we got to fix their breathing first before I can even do my sexual assault examination. So definitely, you know, like Stephanie said, you know, if there's injuries, if there's any lacerations, if there's any bleeding, definitely go to the ER first. And then after, you know, they're evaluated, he or she's evaluated in the ER, then that's when, you know, the process will continue on. And that goes, and for me too, in the middle of my assessment, if I come across during my assessment that, you know, there's an abnormality in, you know, a patient's breathing, or if their vital signs are off, or if I find, like, you know, some really, you know, extensive lacerations and things like that and bruising, I will consult with the emergency room doctor first before I continue to do with my assessment.
If someone, Stephanie, needs, let's say on a Saturday night at 2 a.m, someone's assaulted, and maybe they're on campus and don't have a way to get anywhere, what should they do at that point?
They can call the shelter. We have discussed this. We have a vehicle that we can go and switch out our cars, get the shelter van, pick them up, and take them where they need to go. And that is absolutely an option.
Great. So, Deb, if a survivor or a patient would like to have access to their exam records, how do they go about doing that?
So by law, I can't release any information. It has to go through law enforcement. And, you know, it has to go, like, for instance, if the assault happened on campus, then one of your law enforcement officers would contact me and I can release the information to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what if someone doesn't want to go through the criminal process, though? What if someone...
So then if they don't want to go through the criminal process, then it'll have to go through the attorney here. So it'll go through our lawyer, and then you know, we'll draw up the papers, and then there has to be an agreement signed, and then, you know, there has to be a chain of custody, and then we can release their records. But if it's reportable, it has to go through law enforcement, and it has to go through the legal system here at JRMC.
I have another question in the chat. For someone who is interested in helping survivors in the future, how did you all get involved in your jobs, or what made you passionate about this work?
I actually started as a volunteer at the shelter almost 12 years ago, and then became a staff member. And in 2016, we started our sexual assault program. And I came on just as an advocate. It's 40 hours of classroom training. Then you have to have 10 hours where you actually follow a trained advocate on SANES and some courtroom accompaniment. I just have always been interested in helping people. And so I just kind of fell into it naturally, so to speak.
And I can tell you, from my years of being in the ER, you know, I have taken care of, you know, many people from all walks of life: domestic violence victims, sexual assault victims, trafficking victims. And the reason why I got into nursing is because I wanted to make a change, because every ER that I worked in, we had to send our patients out. The sexual assault patients, we had to send them to various hospitals, and I just didn't like that. I wanted to work in a facility where I can actually practice during the specialty and actually give back, and not have my patients go to another hospital to be treated for a sexual assault.
Hannah, would you like to chime in on that?
Sure. So I, like Stephanie, just kind of fell into this work. I knew that some form of social work or human services was going to be my next step after college. And so I was led by a family friend to our agency and spoke with the executive director. And at the time, there was a position open, and it was volunteer coordinator. So I started doing that, and just kind of worked with vetting volunteers and doing outreach events and things like that. And then eventually my position kind of merged with another position, the outreach prevention specialist. And I became the community engagement specialist. And over the last 3 years, I have to say I've become very passionate about this work. And I am a survivor of trauma myself as a teenager, and I recall being assigned a social worker that didn't do a great job with trauma-informed care, and I felt like there was something wrong with that picture. That that something should have been better in that response process, and so I got my associate's degree in social work just to kind of learn about social work and what it entails. And then I got my bachelor's in family and child development because that's what I'm passionate about. And I decided that whatever I do, whatever I end up at, I want to be serving other people. I want to be making other people feel safe and feel supported, and I want to be helping others heal in a way that I wasn't helped before. So, wow, that's the first time I've ever said that out loud like that. I've kind of
We have it
a little
recorded.
bit about it before, kind of mentioned it before, but never really put it all together like that. So thanks for asking. But yeah, this has been an incredible journey for me, both as a survivor and as a growing professional in the field. So thanks.
We can cut that part out and give you a copy of it. I have a follow-up question. Is it ever hard on you, mentally, physically, to do what you do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're seeing people at their most hurt, and when they're most vulnerable, and sometimes when they're very, very angry, and sometimes we take the brunt of that anger. I think we're lucky in the fact that we have an agency that's willing to provide us support systems. So we have access to our counselors when we need them as well. I think the other thing that's pretty good about our agency is that we can come together, we can cry about it, we can be sad about it, but we can also uplift each other. We have a weird sense of humor at our agency, and we just kind of say that's kind of what gets us through, because we just joke about stuff that people might think, okay, you people have lost your minds, but that's how we get through that. At least that's how I get through. But sometimes it's incredibly hard. I've cried many a night over some of the cases, but yeah, it's pretty hard.
I have to agree with you, Stephanie. I love this kind of work. I'm passionate about taking care of people, and especially sexual assault victims, human trafficking victims. And, for me, it's self-care, meditation, just kind of getting out there and just, leaving some things in the office. And sometimes it's not always easy, but I try and leave most of the stuff at the office, and then pick it back up when I come back into work. But it can be difficult at times, and it's just who we are. It's what we want, what we want to contribute to society. So
yeah, I think the work that we do, there's no barrier to the type of person that we work with. We work with people of all ages, shapes, sizes, colors, genders, it doesn't matter. We see them all, we work with them all. And I think, we go through waves of just, feeling like, okay, if we can just get that one service, if we can just say the right thing in this one session to get them to understand, how valuable they are and how, worthy they are of this healing, then maybe that'll make the difference. And I think for a lot of us, we get used to going through and saying the same thing every day and doing the same thing every day with different people under different circumstances. And then, one day something happens. Somebody gets that protective order, or somebody's offender gets incarcerated and justice is served, or somebody just comes to me and says, you know what, Hannah, I hope you know that you've made all the difference in this healing journey for me, and I think those are the moments where we really know that we're where we're supposed to be, and that makes all of the hard moments, the moments of disappointment, or the moments of, feeling like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, I think that makes it all worth it. And we say, and we're able to remind ourselves in those dark moments that, there's a reason why we're doing this. And that's what I'm working towards. And, if every day I have to get up and wonder whether or not I'm making a difference, if I know that I made a difference in one person's life, that's what keeps us going. Just knowing how we help, knowing how we are connecting people with the healing that they need and that they want so desperately. It definitely gets hard. It definitely weighs on us. But yeah, I think what Deb said too about leaving it at the office, obviously we can't leave everything at the office. Sometimes we carry things with us, but I think those moments of healing, those moments of progress and evolution and prevention, those things are what carry us.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for those answers. Those were your entry stories and that question. Those were fabulous answers. Thank you.
It just got real deep.
It may get deeper.
And thank you to who asked those questions. Those were great questions as well. So thank you as well. Yeah. So I guess, does anyone have additional questions? I think I've gone, well, y'all anticipated most of my list of questions, so y'all answered them before I could ask them. But participants, attendees, if any of y'all have additional questions, go ahead and send them in now. And I'll just sort of, if we'd like to maybe summarize or wrap up I'll give each of you a moment to kind of to sum it all up for us, if you could.
I think I would just like to add that if there's a survivor who's listening, there's help out there, and it's a phone call away. Or if they're on campus, I know Hannah's there. And if someone's looking for that help, it's a phone call and we'll help them get through the process as best we can. But we will always be there to listen, support, and we will be there to tell you, I believe you.
That's great. Deb, anything you'd like to?
You know what? Actually, I just wanted to clarify a reportable versus a non-reportable, because some people think that you have to report your sexual assault and you don't have to report it immediately. If, I explain this to my patients, if you're not in that state to report it yet, they have up until 5 years. I mean, they can have their sexual assault examination. They have the advocates still there. They can, access any of the resources and counseling and still be able they don't have to report it. You know what I mean? Whereas, so, if you want to report it, that's fine. But I have some patients that choose not to report it. And, it's okay. It's when they're ready, when they're ready to complete this journey and, close the door. So, if there's anyone out there that thinks that they necessarily have to report their sexual assault, or they know someone that's what they think, just let them know that no, there's other options, and they don't necessarily have to report their assault in order to in order to get their sexual assault kits done and to have the resources for them.
Thank you, Deb.
Yeah, I would just like to second everything that Stephanie said. And also, if someone is nervous about reporting, or maybe they want to go for a forensic examination, but they don't necessarily want to go to campus officials or law enforcement beforehand, that's why our crisis line exists. If you want somebody to go with you to get an exam, if you want to say, I want an advocate there walking in the doors with me, we can do that. Just give us a call. So again, I second everything Stephanie said, and I just genuinely hope that this has brought information and awareness to even just one person in our community, so that they know that there's safety and support out there, regardless of which path they choose to move forward on.
Absolutely.
Agreed. Well, I just want to thank everyone for attending tonight. Deb, Stephanie, Hannah, thank you all so much for all the great information and all the great answers as well. We do have another program on Thursday, so just 2 nights from now, also at 7 o'clock. It is entitled Sexual Violence Response, a Coordinated Community Effort, and we will have representatives from Seguin Police Department, the Guadalupe County Attorney's Office, the Children's Advocacy Center, and of course the shelter as well. So if you're able to attend on Thursday night, we would love to have you, and please spread the word to anyone you know who might be interested as well. But thank you all for being here tonight, and we hope you got something out of this. And stay safe and have a great rest of your week. Thank you all for attending.